Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. So in today's video I'm going to be talking all about poetry. Fun. Yeah, so in today's video I'm going to be talking about how to revise for poetry. This is something that basically next week I have my English mock on poetry. So at the moment I've been doing a lot of poetry revision, we've been doing some in class, so I felt like this would be a good time to do it. Again, it's really chilled. I'm wearing my Wildcats jumper from when I did High School Musical, and my makeup is like the most basic thing ever. But time to do poetry. So I'm doing poetry with AQA, and so if you do poetry, that didn't make sense. If you are doing your GCSEs with AQA, then you will have this, and this is the English Lit Poetry Anthology. So inside here you obviously have the, I can't even remember which the two are. You've got Love and Relationships or Power and Conflict. My tips will work whether you're doing it with AQA or not, but because I'm with AQA, I'm going to be talking about the Love and Relationships cluster. If you do Power and Conflict or whatever, they'll still work. So have this. Basically is something that you can like do all of your own annotations on each of the poems. To be honest, they're all rubbish and I don't get half of them. Porphyria's Lover is one I did a load on, but I'm sure if you've been at school you will have highlighted and annotated all of the poems that you're doing anyway. So once I've done that, basically this whole like last week we had homework to create mind maps about the poems. We were meant to do one big one, but I don't like that, so I've done tons and tons of little ones, and I have got another one to do. So I'll do some overlays so you can see and everything. I've done almost all 15 poems. I've just started, well literally I've drawn a line. The last poem I need to do, but what I like to do is I do a huge title in the middle, and I do it in bold, and then I like outline it, and then I do like the name and the date they were like, because I'm not sure whether it's the date of they were published or when they're born and died. Some of them it's born and died, and then I'm not sure what others are because they're just one date. But I write the date on there because then I kind of know the time period and I can write about that in context. So yeah, that's what I put in the middle because I feel like it's very important, and if I make the title like big and bold, then it's easy to see when it's on my wall. The thing I do is I will draw off a few arrows if I know exactly what titles I want to do, but if I don't know any like subheadings, I will just draw one and then I'll think. The one that I always do and I think is really important is structure. So this is like the rhyme scheme, different bits about like how many stanzas there are, how many lines there are, because in some poems that like makes a difference like of what it's about, and it can kind of help with the storyline of it. I don't know if that makes sense. Then the next thing after that, I'll do another arrow. I'll do things like devices. Some of them aren't technically devices, but I like to put them down under devices anyway because that's how I think of it in my head. So I've got things like metaphors, personification, alliteration, all of those different things. And then for example, in When We Two Parted, because there was a lot of repetition in it, I just did a whole other section for repetition rather than putting it under devices. I've really hurt my shoulder and like ouch. And then I'll have extras, so quotes that I think are important but don't quite have a device. Some of them I've written like what it's about. So in When We Two Parted I put love brings him anger due to his past experiences, so he feels depressed at the thought of love. So yeah, and I have made loads and loads of these posters which I can now stick up and put on my wall, and these are just so useful because if they're where you see them all the time, then you're just constantly reading the information and learning it. So I think this is really, really useful, and I got most of this just from the notes we had done at school. However, if I hadn't like had enough, what I would use was, wherever it's disappeared to, is this, and this is by Collins, and it's the English Poetry Anthology, and you buy them specifically to the cluster you're doing. So mine's obviously Love and Relationships, so this whole book is on Love and Relationships. So what it's really useful for, so it's got, let's go to the first one just because I'm talking about When We Two Parted. Actually, I'll do the last one because that's the one I'm about to do. So the last poem I need to do now is Climbing My Grandfather. So it has a page all about, it's got the whole poem there and it's kind of been annotated itself. To be fair, the annotations are in some ways useful, but say if there's like an extended metaphor, a lot of them aren't explained what it shows, so it's just saying, oh, it's this, but which in some ways is useful, but in some ways isn't. But I have used quite a lot of these and added them to my posters because I just think it's very useful. But it's got lots of different things on annotations, which is so useful. And then on the next page, or like maybe not, it's got different things about the poem, themes, and like form and structure. So again, it's just really useful because about the poem, it's got a little bit of context about the actual writer of the poem. So for example, it's saying like where they grew up, or they're saying whether they think the poet is written by the speaker, like it's written by, no, is narrated by the person who wrote it, or whether it's just like a speaker. But then I think ideas and themes are really useful because they help you make a relation between all the different poems. So like family love, romantic love, sexual love, there's a lot of love. Things like in Sing Song there's racism, which is a really big theme, which you can just write about like loads of different things, and it just helps to link all of the poems together, which I haven't done yet, but I should probably do that. Yeah, so that's one thing that's really useful in this book because it has got not super in detail, but in enough detail on each of the individual poems, which is really good. So in this book, all the poems are split up between different, like there are just like 4 poems or something in each section, and then right at the end of the section there are some practice questions. I haven't actually done the ones in this specific book yet, but there's questions like, so it's split into the different sections, so like there's a page of questions on Winter Swans, a page of questions on Sing Song, but the questions include things like, how does the structure of the poem mirror the climb? So even if you haven't quite thought of that, it will then give you more ideas, so you can write about that. Well, what's happening to the lighting? Anyway, so yeah, it's really useful for that. But then they have, right at the end of the section, there's like poem which have got like review questions, which are more in a way exam style questions, but they're not how they are in the actual exam. There is a comparing poems section, which I think is so useful because in part of the exam there is a section where you have to compare poems. So this has a little grid which shows a poem 1, a poem 2, and then you have to fill in different themes and ideas that are similar, structure and form that's similar, so you can kind of write about that. But it's also got a huge section where it talks about tips on what the kind of questions will be like, how you can write them, how you can set them out. So it's just really, really useful, and they've got loads and loads of different information on it. And they've also got a worked answer, which I think is so useful. So like a good answer, and they've highlighted loads of different things, so they're like saying what's good, what's not good, if you get me. And then it says examiner's comments. So the one that's in the book here shows a level 5 response, which obviously is a pass. So you can kind of then think, if you're aiming for a 5, aim for something that's like that. If you're aiming for higher, you can write even more or less. Like you can just kind of think about that, which is so useful. And then it's got mixed exam style questions. So these are much, much longer, long answer questions. Maybe not long answer, but maybe like 30 marks, so as it would be in the test. So you obviously couldn't write it in here, but it's just kind of setting it out. You just use some paper, write it all out, and you can just do that. I'm not sure if it's got a mark scheme in here though, but there's loads and loads of different ones. It's like before you and mine, and compare with mother any distance. So there's loads of different things, and it's got a question. And then at the back it's got answers of every single question, so you can check to see if you're right, see how you've done it, and for all of the different comparisons it's got suggested content and loads of different stuff here, which is so useful. This book wasn't that expensive, and I think even though like the actual annotations aren't that good, it's really good when it comes to advice on comparing the poems and for having loads of stuff to do comparing questions with. If you're not with AQA, I'm pretty sure if you go to, what website? Collins might do it, but I think Collins just do AQA. If you go on the CGP website, I'm pretty sure they'll have stuff that do match up really nicely. And this is also for poetry, and this I got off of the CGP website. So this is the AQA Anthology. of Love and Relationships. So again, they have the AQA ones for Love and Relationships and for the Power and Conflict, but they also have all the different exam boards. I think all of them, most of them, maybe not Edge, but this is full of exam style questions. So right at the front of the page, like the book, it has how to use this book. So it's got use this workbook with or without the poetry guide. I don't actually have the CGP poetry guide because I have loads of other stuff already. I didn't feel the need to buy it. But it's got literally so many questions on every single one of the poems, and it's got loads of revision tasks, practice exam questions. So I will just show you a few different things. It's just really useful. They may show an extract of the poem, and then it's got questions about it which just like make you think, but also it has stuff about mood where you can compare the different poems, analysing language and structure, and it's also got really good help on, why am I showing you the book? Really good useful tips on how to plan your answer for your long answer question, because like at school we don't really get told how to plan. They're just like, okay, right, time to do your mock poetry, let's go do it, and you're like,
oh okay, I don't know how to write an answer.
So this is really useful if your school is rubbish like that. Mine. Again, in the back of this book they have some sample answers, and it's kind of getting you to mark it, so you can kind of, I think that's a really good way, because by reading that you can see if whether you think it's a like level 6 or whether you think it's a 9, and then you can try and put yourself in that place when you're doing your own work, so you can look at it and think, okay, I've got this, this and this, so that means I've got a 5, or I've got this, this, this and this, but I haven't done this, but I get a 7. Like, it just depends, and it will really help when it comes to actually doing your exam. So again, this book, super useful, and you don't actually need to have the specific anthologies, because this does have the extracts of poems in here as well, but it's useful to have everything, because if you have everything together, then you're more likely to like get loads done. After I had like obviously annotated all of my poems, we've been doing this thing at school, and you could do this online or you could ask your teacher if they could do it with you, but basically my teacher, she just read out the poem, and as she read out the poem, she just told us a ton of information. We didn't have anything to read from, everything was in our own notes, which I think is really important when you're trying to understand something, because if you can write it in your own notes, then it kind of shows it's going in your head and you know it better. So an example we did was The Farmer's Bride. And so she read out a ton of information, and we had to just write notes as if you were in a lecture, which is really useful if you're going to university, which, I mean, I don't really want to, but I mean, it's useful. And so like she just read out a ton of information, and these are just really quick notes. They're not in detail, but they're stuff that you could write an answer about, which I think is really good. So yeah, she's only done this for like 2 of the poems, I think, so I'm gonna do this online and just write down a ton of notes in my own words. So just Google Farmer's Bride notes, annotations, and then you get a bit more than what you just think of. Aha! Okay, unseen poetry. This is something that we have just started to do, and to be honest, I'm not very good at unseen poetry. It's really hard to do, but what you could do is Google unseen poetry practice questions. One thing I have actually done is, again, use the AQA website, and I have printed off a section of the poetry, unseen poetry section. That didn't make sense. So I can practice doing some unseen poetry in like an actual exam style question off AQA, so I know it's legitimate and I know that it could be similar to something I would get in the exam. So I would say do that, because it's really, really useful. But if you do get that, what I would say is, once you've got the poem, highlight different things and look at them both, especially if it's a comparison one. Look at them both and like highlight things that you could talk about, because obviously you can't just write something if you don't know it. So spend like 5 minutes at the start just reading through it and highlighting and annotating different things that go together, whether they've got the same rhyme scheme, which could say something, or they both use a lot of repetition, or enjambment. I love that word, like say genres or whatever. So you can find like common ground, and then you could start writing about that, and then remember to relate it to the question though, because that's a bit silly if you don't, and then try and think differences. I'm sure every poem has something that's really different. You will find differences. I don't think you have to do differences or have to do similarities, but it's better to do both just in case. So then like find all of that and then just try and write as quick as possible and you'll get something down, and that's my only tip for that really. Unseen poetry that's not comparing is just read it through a couple times, 1 or 2, just so like you can get it in your head, understand what's happening, and then do a little bit of highlighty again, annotating. And again, whether you're comparing or not, do a little mind map. Even if you're not doing unseen poetry, do a little mind map, or however your brain works, get your notes down at the top on what you could write about. So I will do an overlay, but the question was, compare how the poets present feelings of love in Sing Song and one other poem. So they didn't give a specific poem, and obviously this wouldn't be unseen. So you then have to think, okay, what poem is similar in love, relation-wise, to Sing Song? So I thought, okay, Porphyria's Lover, you know. So I then just quickly did a mind map of Sing Song. I was like, okay, love, 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 what is it like? Different things that could show the love. And then I did the same for Porphyria's Lover, and then using like different coloured highlighters, I highlighted things that I could write about that related. So different things like being blinded by love, being devoted to her, that kind of thing, iambic tetrameter, rhyme scheme, all of that stuff. And then in half an hour, I got done 2 and a bit pages of writing. So yeah, quite good. I mean, I do need to add more in. I don't know what level it would be, she didn't say, but just doing lots of practice questions is obviously so useful, and in the long run it will benefit you to have practiced as many exam style things as possible, because once it comes to the exam, it's not going to be like quick 1-answer questions, they're going to be long answers. I hope that this video was helpful in some ways if you had no clue on poetry. This is just tips for revising on poetry, not what's in the poems, because I mean, I don't think I should do that because I don't think I'd be very good at it. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you again soon with another one. I probably won't do a revision one next week, but I mean, I might do because actual exams are coming up soon. I don't know what I'll be doing, but I'll see you all soon, and I love you all lots. Bye! I can't remember what I said, and now I need to film all my overlay clips. Oh no.